Top of the evening, everybody. Chris McDonald on a Thursday night. Great to see everybody here with us tonight. We were originally scheduled to have Carla Nicole with us at 8 o'clock tonight. We apologize. We were sort of holding out hope. She's had some physical things come up today and was not able to be with us tonight. She'll be with us either Monday night or next Thursday night. We got a lot to talk with her about. But as the Lord would work this out, and it's not a bad substitution at all. We have got the one and only Bill Federer. We talked to him this afternoon. This morning we did about a 35-minute, 40-minute interview that we want to play for you tonight on the Early Bird. This is our Early Bird special. We're going to be back at 11 tonight for the news update. We got a lot of news, breaking news. on several fronts, but none the least of which is this right here. And I know some of you have heard about this tonight. Some of you have not. But it seems that the former piece of turd of the FBI, James Comey, tonight posted this. He set some shells up on the beach, took a picture of it, and Nick Sorta and others on X is exploding tonight. Don Jr. has tweeted it out. Kash Patel, the current FBI leader, tweeted it out. And Christy Noem has chimed in on this tonight. And folks, 8647. 86 is a term that Antifa gang members and militants mean kill. You've heard the term, we're going to 86 them. Well, that's what it means. So Comey's out there tonight claiming that he didn't understand that 86 was a number to mean kill. This guy was the head of the FBI, for goodness sake. The 47, I guess he don't know Trump's the 47th president either. We're going to talk about this tonight. And we got Leslie Millway coming on. We're going to talk about this pay for play. The Clintons are griping about the Qatari airplane. And she's got a few things. So she's going to be up with us tonight. James Akers may chime in if we can keep him awake. So it's going to be a good late night show. We do these late night shows. You West Coast folks always show up. We have a huge audience at night, late at night, for all us night owls. So if you want to hear the news stories, come on back. Be with us. A lot of these have already been posted on our Telegram room tonight. You're going to love this interview with Bill Federer. Some of you, especially our Bible students, we talked about this morning. Bill's going to fill in the blanks for you, as Chris can't. Chris is not a historian. I'd love to be one. I should have been one. I love history, but there ain't nobody can give you a historical perspective of things like Bill Federer at AmericanMinute.com. And I want you to listen to the interview. We'll take some questions at the end, and then we'll be back here tonight around 11, maybe 11:15, somewhere in there, to do a news show with you tonight. We've got a great guest. Leslie's going to be great. She's always great. So we got a good night ahead of us. Don't forget tomorrow night, McJustice returns for the first time in nearly 5 years. Oh, it's going to be a little different formatted, but there was going to be some pretty rough stuff that we got to cover tomorrow night. It's all criminal justice cases. And a few commentary here and there. A lot of it's just going to be videos showing you the lawlessness of the country. And it's very sick. Some of this stuff that's going on in our nation. And but we'll do that tomorrow night. And we'll see how it goes for a late show. We've got thunderstorms rumbling in here tomorrow night. So it's going to be some McJustice in the atmosphere and on the McFiles tomorrow night. So come on back and be with us tomorrow night as well. Listen, I hope you enjoy this interview with Bill Federer. Please respect our guests, as we always ask you to do. We don't mind if you affirm, but please no paragraphs. And just let Bill talk to you about Israel tonight. This is a very important interview because you're going to see America's role in the Reformation of Israel and why our nations have been connected ever since. And the blessings of this nation are tied to what happened on this date, 77 years ago. It really happened yesterday, May the 14th. But the day after May the 14th, 6 Arab nations declared war on Israel to try to destroy her. Bill's going to fill you in on all the little blanks and all the details. So get your notepad out. If you're in my Bible class, there'll be a quiz on it tomorrow. No, there won't. I should throw a pop quiz, but I won't. But anyway, I'm a tough teacher. They'll tell you. He's a tough taskmaster in the mornings. We have a good time. You should come join us because we have a really good time talking about the Bible and so forth. We're going to talk about this tonight later. I want you to enjoy Bill Federer tonight, AmericanMinute.com, the role of America and the Reformation of Israel as a nation. Nobody can quite do it like Bill Federer. Enjoy the interview, folks, and I'll be back with you for a few minutes afterwards, but we'll see you back here tonight for a news update with Leslie Millway and James Akers. Tonight, he's back from his excursions, and we're grateful for that. Here's Bill Federer and the Mac Man. Enjoy the interview. And a good evening, everybody. Chris McDonald with you in a very special pre-recorded McFiles program. We're always glad to have our dear buddy, Bill Federer, AmericanMinute.com. Did I get the .com right? Do I actually? Right. I see. I'm amazing myself in my old age that I'm beginning to remember these things. But it's good to see you, man. It's been a while, and always a pleasure to have you. You're one of the favorite guests I have. When people ask me about who's coming back, your name is always at the top, and it's good to have you tonight. Good to see you.
Hey, great to be with you.
Bill, as we're recording this today, it's May 15th, and yesterday Israel celebrated 77 years of independence, and President Trump is doing his best to, you know, get the Arabs on board, trying to not to uh, go after Israel, fight, and cause a great deal of conflict. I know there's a lot of some concern in some circles that that the Arabs are not going to hold their end of the bargain, and I guess it remains to be seen. But I think it would be good to give people a little idea of what Israel has actually been up against with her fight for this independence, because she's really been, it's a miracle of God. I'll look at, I've had a program or two on this in the last few nights, and I don't believe that the 1948 event of reforming as a nation was just a miracle of the 21st century. I believe, other than the resurrection itself of Jesus Christ, to have this group of what I would call vagabonds and people that, though chosen by God, they had not been rejected, but they had been set aside because of their unbelief, wandering like animals for nearly 2,000 years. God, in his sovereign grace, brought them back together, reformed their nation in 1948, brought them into a land, part of the land that he had promised Abraham. Buddy, that's nothing that Cecil B. DeMille can put in a movie. That's what we call biblical miracle, and that is the miracle, if you think about it, of all the Bible, other than the resurrection itself of Christ. Because Israel stands today, and she has withstood 77 years of attempts to destroy her.
Right. Yeah. The story begins with the Ottoman Empire and then the Second Great Awakening revival in America. Charles Finney, tent meetings, out of it came the YMCA, but also the millennialists. These are people that discovered in the Bible that Jesus will come back and rule and reign for 1,000 years. And it's always been in the Bible, but they really hadn't focused on it until now. And so they saw that it was necessary for the Jews to be back in the Holy Land for these prophecies to be fulfilled. And so the Christians in England went to the Jewish synagogues and told them that they needed to start thinking about going back to the promised land so these prophecies could be fulfilled. Jeffrey Alderman wrote in the Jewish Chronicle, November 8th, 2012, the Balfour Declaration was born out of religious sentiment. Arthur Balfour, British Foreign Secretary, was a Christian mystic who believed that the Almighty had chosen him to be an instrument of the divine will, the purpose of which was to restore the Jews to their ancient homeland, perhaps as a precursor to the second coming of the Messiah. And then he goes on, the Balfour Declaration was thus intended to assist in the fulfillment of biblical prophecy. This appealed to Lloyd George, British Prime Minister, believing that the prophecies of the Bible he knew inside and out. And then you have Anita Shapira wrote a book, Israel, A History, published 2014. The idea of Jews returning to their ancient homeland as the first step to world redemption seems to have originated among a specific group of evangelical English Protestants that flourished in England in the 1840s. They passed this notion on to Jewish circles. And so the Jews on their own began to buy land in the Ottoman Empire. And then finally, Theodor Herzl, a Jewish leader, organized the first Zionist Congress.
Right.
And then they began to buy land and, miraculously brought back the ancient Hebrew language. And then something else fits into the picture, oil. So in the 1800s, where did oil come from? Whales and Moby Dick, right? And these whaling boats would chase the whales all around the world, almost to extinction, so they could boil their blubber down to put in whale oil lamps. But then oil was discovered in the Drake oil well in the middle 1800s. And then oil is discovered in Oklahoma. And it was 1859 was the Drake oil well. And then 1908, oil is discovered in Persia, Iran. And so Winston Churchill changes the British Navy from coal to oil. But there's only one oil well in all of England, in the Sherwood Forest of all places. And so the British need oil for their navy. And so in 1908, they form the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company. You know it better as BP.
AP.
British Petroleum is the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company. It changed the name in 1953. But then Germany industrializes. Kaiser Wilhelm II, and he needs oil. And so he does a deal with the Turks. And Turkey, the Ottoman Empire, controlled Kirkuk, which is today Iraq. And so they build the Berlin-Baghdad Railroad, and they do an arms for oil agreement with Kaiser Wilhelm II, Abdul Hamid II. And then there's a movie called The Promise that Christian Bale starred in, that goes through this period where, the Turks and the Armenians were getting along, but then the Germans show up and whip them into this war frenzy. And that's when they begin to do the Armenian genocide. And the Germans give the Turks brand new guns that they can kill the Armenians with, and in exchange for oil. And anyway, half of World War I took place in the Middle East. After the war, the map of Europe was redrawn, but the map of the Middle East was redrawn because there's no Ottoman Empire. And so the same way that after the Spanish-American War, the U.S. took Puerto Rico as a protectorate, well, after the World War I, the European countries began to divvy up the Ottoman Empire as protectorates. So Britain took the British Mandate, which was everything from the Mediterranean, Egypt to Jordan, Iraq, all the way over almost to Persia. France took Syria and Lebanon. Russia took a little Armenia. Italy wanted to get some of the coast of what is today Turkey, and it's called the Sykes-Picot Treaty. And another person we have to look at is Chaim Weizmann. He's a Jewish chemist from Russia to England, and England was running short of explosives, and they needed acetone, a solvent. And Chaim Weizmann developed a bacterial fermentation process to make acetone. You took breweries and turned them into these factories, and the British were very grateful and wanted to make him a sir or a knight. And instead, he said, I would really like a homeland for the Jewish people.
Wow.
And so they issued the Balfour Declaration, giving the Jews what's called the British Mandate, which is the Mediterranean over to Iraq and Syria down to Egypt and Arabia. It's huge. It's the same borders that God promised Moses and the same borders that David reached and filled out. And then you have another monkey wrench thrown in, and that is Lawrence of Arabia. Now, Lawrence was a lieutenant in the British Navy, the British Army. Lawrence was stationed in Cairo. Lawrence was sent on a reconnaissance assignment to check with the Sharif of Mecca to see if the Arab Muslims would join the British in fighting the Turkish Muslims. So we have two different kinds of Muslims.
Right.
And the Sharif of Mecca is relatively moderate, and Lawrence of Arabia took it upon himself to lie, and he admits it later. He said, rather than just reporting back, he tells the Sharif of Mecca that if they help the British drive out the Turks, they will get all the land in the Middle East. And he later admits that he lied in his 7 Pillars of Wisdom. Lawrence of Arabia wrote that I risked the fraud on my conviction that Arab help was necessary to our quick and speedy victory, and better we win and then break our word than lose. For being a successful trickster and to prevent this unpleasantness arising, I began in my reports to conceal the true stories of things. So he was lying to the British in the reports, and then he was lying to the Arabs, telling them that they'd get all the land. Well, after the victory, the British are like, you promised them what? And so the British said, okay, we got to patch this up. We'll take the son of the Sharif of Mecca named Fazl, and we'll make him king of Iraq. That'll suffice him. But he wanted Syria and Iraq. He wanted Damascus. He wanted all that. And when the French came in, because the Sykes-Picot Treaty gave France Syria, the French drove Fazl's out. So all he had was Iraq. And his brother was not happy. His brother Abdullah. Abdullah starts organizing a guerrilla warfare against the French. And Winston Churchill steps in and says, France is our friend. They fought with us against Germany. We don't want another war. So Winston Churchill is having lunch in Cairo and takes a napkin and draws out a map of the British Mandate and then takes his pen and begins to take two-thirds of it away from the Jews and create another brand new country called Jordan, and makes Abdullah, the brother of Fazl, king of Jordan, saying that'll suffice him, that'll be enough. And it's interesting that the map has a little jut in the desert, sort of it goes up and down for no apparent reason, just in the middle of the desert, the border changes, and they call it Churchill's Hiccup because he was known to drink a little brandy with his lunch. But sure enough, that's the border. Just for some unknown reason, it just does this little zigzag in the desert. Well, so you have the Sharif of Mecca, and he did work with the British. He was what Lawrence of Arabia called a modernist because he was in charge of Mecca, where the Hajj is, the pilgrimage. One of the five pillars of Islam is once in your life, you're supposed to make a pilgrimage to Mecca. And so you had pilgrims coming from Indonesia and, parts of China and, the Middle East. And so he just wanted to all get along. And he expanded that get along to the Jews and the British and everybody else. And so you have Fazl, who is now the king of Iraq. He says this in 1919: "We feel the Arabs and Jews are cousins, having suffered similar oppression at the hands of powers stronger than themselves. We look with deepest sympathy on the Zionist movement. We wish the Jews a most hearty welcome home." The Sharif of Mecca, the dad, says the resources of the country are the virgin soil, which will be developed by the Jewish immigrants, that the country is for its original sons, for all their differences, a sacred and beloved homeland. And then you have Abdullah, and he says this. He writes it in 1948. He says, "No people on earth have been less anti-Semitic than Arabs. The persecution of the Jews has been confined almost entirely to Christian nations in the West."
Wow.
Right? The Spanish Inquisition. He
Oh.
goes on, the Jews themselves will admit that never since the Great Dispersion did Jews develop so freely and reach such importance as in Spain when it was an Arab possession. Because once, Ferdinand and Isabel drove the Muslims out, and then they did the Inquisition where they forced the Jews to either convert or leave. He goes on, "With very minor exceptions, Jews have lived for many centuries in the Middle East in complete peace and friendliness with their Arab neighbors." And so you saw leaders in the Middle East saying the Ottoman Empire is gone, and we realize that the future is the West. And so you would have Ataturk in Turkey, and he dresses in business suits, and he would make statements like, he is a weak ruler who needs religion to uphold his government. Ataturk said, even before accepting the religion of the Arabs, the Turks were a great nation. Ataturk says, Mohammedanism was based on Arab nationalism above all nationalities. The purpose of the religion founded by Muhammad over all nations was to drag them into including Arab national politics. It may have suited tribes in the desert. It's no good for a modern progressive state. And so here's Ataturk of Turkey saying, we want to be more Western. He gets rid of the fezzes and the burqas, gets rid of the Arabic language, gets rid of the calls to prayer and all the the imams at 4:30 in the morning saying their calls, and then he is the first one to have women uh, be taught in schools, and women wear Western clothes and gets rid of the beards and has men, shave, and then he influences the other countries, and he meets with the Shah in Iran, who wants to teach women and have women come out and wear. And then in Syria, they're having beauty pageants. And that king of Afghanistan wants to be more secular. And you would see all this is moving in a Western direction. Kabul, Afghanistan, there's pictures of, girls wearing skirts going to class. There's pictures of the Shah of Iran, Reza Pahlavi, meeting with Truman and Kennedy and Eisenhower, and pictures of Iran where, there's discos and, in Cairo, Egypt, the beaches look like Southern California and the Beach Boys. And Gamal Nasser is separating himself. In 1958, the head of Egypt, Gamal Nasser, said, I met the head of the Muslim Brotherhood, and he sat with me and made his requests. What did he request? To make the wearing of the hijab mandatory in Egypt and demand that every woman walking the streets wear a scarf. I told him my opinion is that every person in his own house decides for himself the rules. He replied, no, as the ruler, you're responsible. I told him, sir, you have a daughter in the School of Medicine. She's not wearing a scarf. And if you're unable to make one girl, your daughter, wear a scarf, you want me to put one on 10 million women myself? And so what happened? How did we go from that? So uh, the Lawrence of Arabia, remember him? And he worked with the Sharif of Mecca. Well, in 1924, the Sharif of Mecca sort of waffled on the treaty with the British. And the British said, well, if you're not going to play with us, we're going to pull back and let Aziz ibn Saud take over Arabia. And in 1924, Aziz ibn Saud captures Mecca. Well, the Saud family is Wahhabi. And even Lawrence of Arabia called them a fanatical Muslim sect, puritanical, everything is strict. And the Wahhabis is where you get the multiple wives, the female circumcision, the cutting off of hands and legs. and so the British say, well, the Saudis will work with us. And so then in 1928, 6 members of the British-run Suez Canal Company start the Muslim Brotherhood and take Wahhabism and turn it into an actual blueprint plan. And so Suez Canal was built by the French, and then the British took it over in the 1880s. And then Gamal Nasser took it over in the 1950s. So the Muslim Brotherhood, they said, let's base our strategy on the 2 cities Muhammad lived in, Mecca and Medina. Mecca, Muhammad was a religious leader. Medina, Muhammad's a political and a military leader. And so they said, let's infiltrate all these countries in the Middle East and pretend to be religious Muslims. And then when the signal's given, we're going to turn into political and militant Muslims and do assassinations. And so Abdullah, that moderate king of Jordan, was on the Temple Mount and, the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem when he's assassinated. And then Gamal Nasser is out, and Anwar Sadat's the new head of Egypt, and he's assassinated. And then they do assassination attempts on Ataturk, but then he dies, and then and so they stir up the Istanbul pogrom in 1955, where they riot, and then you have Russia enter the mix after World War II. The Soviets were not happy that countries wanted to get free from the Soviet Union. And so they did something called critical theory, where they would send people into countries and observe all the groups, ethnic groups, religious groups, economic groups, and then pit them against each other as haves and have-nots, victims, oppressors, and then stir up riots. And then in the confusion, they would do coups and take over the country and make them into Soviet satellites. And so in the 1960s, the Soviets started the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, for the sole purpose of creating division in the Middle East to prevent it from becoming pro-West. Matter of fact, they started FARC in Colombia and ELN in Bolivia. Anything with Liberation Army in it was Soviet.
Right.
And so they uh, so the head of the PLO is Yasser Arafat, and his uncle was the Mufti of Jerusalem that met with Hitler.
That's right.
And
That's right.
so you have you have these leaders that want to be more pro-West, and you have these Wahhabi Muslim Brotherhood people that want to be more Islamic fundamentalists, and they view the Muslim leaders who are friends with the West as having abandoned the way of Islam, and they want to assassinate them. And so once the Sauds have control of Arabia and Mecca and the Hajj, you have Muslims from around the world coming on their pilgrimage getting infected with Wahhabism. And then the big change happened in 1938 when Standard Oil Company, John D. Rockefeller's company, discovers oil in Saudi Arabia. And there's so much oil, Saudi Arabia goes from the poorest Muslim country with mountains of sand and camels to the richest Muslim country. And they use their money to export Wahhabism and teach it. And the violent Muslims agree not to terrorize the Saudis as long as the Saudis are financing their spreading of Wahhabism. And so you have World War II ends, and you have Franklin Roosevelt meets in Tehran, and then the Yalta Conference, and he's there with Stalin and Churchill, and FDR is a couple months before he dies. He's ill. He should not been. He was like, Biden. He should not have been in a position to make negotiations, but he gives half of Europe to the communists. And on its way back, his boat, the USS Quincy, stops off in the Suez Canal, and he meets with Aziz ibn Saud, the king of Saudi Arabia, the Wahhabi guy, who slaughters a goat on deck of the boat, barbecues it for their lunch. And he blindsides FDR by telling him the Jews are bad, bad, bad. FDR's like, well, the Jews, we saved them from the Nazis, and they were helping them go back to the Middle East. And he's like, yeah, the Jews are bad, bad, bad. And then FDR even writes a letter after this meeting to Aziz ibn Saud, saying, as long as I'm president, the United States will not recognize Israel as a nation.
Wow.
Well, within a week,
he died.
FDR dies.
That's right.
And the next president is Truman. And Truman recognizes Israel as a nation. And the next day, May 15th, 1948, Israel is attacked. Now, it gets a little interesting. The British Mandate, remember that? After World War I, the British divided up. And then Winston Churchill takes 2/3 of it to create a Palestinian state called Jordan. But anyway, the Arabs and the Jews don't get along. The Arabs don't like the Jews having this land. And so Winston Churchill issues the White Paper of 1922 saying we're going to restrict Jewish immigration.
Yes.
So 1917 is the Balfour Declaration that says go for it. Now 1922 says, well, maybe not so fast. And then the 1939 White Papers restricts immigration even more. There was a movie called Exodus that Paul Newman starred in that was about these Jews, going over there and the British resisting them. Anyway, the British are tired of the Arab and Jewish conflict. And so once Harry S. Truman creates the United Nations, Britain says, this is the chance we've been waiting to unload this problem. We decide that on May 15th, 1948, we are going to surrender our British mandate to the United Nations. It's your problem now. Bye. And so the clock's ticking. And so here's Israel. They even, meet with some of the Arabs and agree to a partition. But the Arabs say, no, we don't want any Jewish state at all, period.
Wow.
And so they're either going to be absorbed into Jordan. And Abdullah says, okay, you can be a part of Jordan. We'll even give you a state, and we'll even give you a member of the Jordan parliament from the Jews. Well, you know, but the Jews are like, no, we want our own country. And so it comes to Harry S. Truman. And he takes the attitude of hands off, but uh, he had a friend. So when he was in Kansas City, he became friends with a clerk named Eddie Jacobson,
I remember Eddie.
Jewish.
Yes.
And then World War I starts, and Eddie Jacobson is in the military with Harry S. Truman, and they serve together. And then they even run a PX together for their Army's unit. They come back and they start a haberdashery, a men's clothing store in Kansas City together. And then Harry S. Truman's really good at selling clothes, and he ends up running for politics. And then Eddie Jacobson becomes a traveling salesman. And now we have Israel. And Chaim Weizmann, the Jewish chemist that the Balfour Declaration was all about, he is the new leader or the first leader of Israel. And he wants to come and meet Harry S. Truman. The clock's ticking. May 15th is coming. And America is not going to recognize Israel. And so it's just going to be absorbed. And so he's in D.C., but Harry S. Truman doesn't have time for him. And he gets a call from Eddie Jacobson. Mr. President, Harry, old friend, hey, Chaim Weizmann come halfway around the world. He just wants to spend a few minutes with you. Can you just take a couple minutes? You can't say no to me. I'm your old friend, right? And Truman says, okay. And then Chaim Weizmann comes in and says, you have a chance to make history.
Yes,
Out of 2,000 years, you can recognize. And so Truman likes him and says, okay. They even had the U.S. ambassador speaking at the UN who was about to give a speech saying no, and the phone rings, and they call him off the platform, and they say, no, no, the answer is yes. And he comes back and has to change his speech. And so May 14th, 1948, Israel is recognized as a nation. The next day, it's immediately attacked by a half dozen Arab countries. And the peace treaty is negotiated by Ralph Bunche, the first African American to receive the Nobel Peace Prize. Then you have Gamal Nasser takes the Suez Canal and blocks the Israeli ships. Israel comes down, captures the Sinai Peninsula, and Eisenhower talks them into giving up land for peace. Look, let Egypt have the Sinai Peninsula and everything will be fine. And so they do that, but it's not fine. And then you have the 6-Day War, where the surrounding Arab countries attack Israel, but miraculously Israel survives and they capture Jerusalem.
Jerusalem.
And then you have the 1972 Olympics, where those fundamental Wahhabi type Muslims kill the Jews at the Olympics.
Yes.
1973 war, it's over Yom Kippur, so the Jews were praying and they weren't ready for it. And they weren't conquered, but they didn't win as decisively as they did at the previous war. So you have Jimmy Carter arranges the Camp David Accords, and you have Menachem Begin of Israel and Anwar Sadat of Egypt make a peace treaty. And it's wonderful. Everybody's happy. Jews and Arabs, everybody's happy. Billy Graham honors Anwar Sadat. Pat Robertson honors Anwar Sadat. But then the Muslim Brotherhood type people infiltrated the Egyptian military. They're having a parade, and the military stops, turns, faces the platform, lowers their guns, and shoots the president of the country. So when you let Muslims that are fundamentalists into your military, you don't know where their loyalties lie.
So true.
They could be loyal to your country, but they could be infiltrators waiting for the right moment to go to Fort Hood, Texas, and kill a bunch of people and all the rest. Anyway, so the Muslim leaders in the Middle East, they're sitting on pins and needles. They don't know. They want to be more Western and get along, but they have to watch out for these fundamentalists. And then I know I only have a few minutes left.
But let me
But
ask you before you go further. Let me one quick question, and we'll sort. I know because your time's sort of coming to an end, and I do want to just to sum this up. That push for the Palestinian state has been ongoing since Eisenhower. Do you think, as a historian that has seen this Land for Peace initiative, Bibi Netanyahu
For
said in
warning and just said
1978, he
we're
said
going to
the only obstacle to peace, in his opinion, was the push for that Palestinian state. And Bill, they've tried to push that on Israel. America's doing it. Two quick questions. The Abrahamic Accords has a clause in it for a Palestinian state, from what I understand. And I do not believe in any circumstances do you codify terrorists and give them a state. That's just my opinion. I'll let you wrap us up on that. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I didn't want you to get late and be late for your next interview. But is that a fair statement that this Land for Peace has been the source of this bloodshed that we've seen since 1948? Israel has been shedding blood over this very fight since her existence or reformation.
peace.
Peace.
So the definition of peace in Islam is when the whole world submits to the will of Allah, there will be peace. So when you tell the fundamentalist Muslim that you want peace, they hear world Islam. To them, world peace means world Islam. And a moderate Muslim thinks the world's going to submit to Allah later. And the fundamentalist Muslim thinks the world's going to submit to Allah now.
Interesting.
And so when the non-Muslim world shows itself really strong, the fundamentalist Muslims go into remission. They're like, well, we're still going to conquer, but it must just have to wait till later.
Interesting.
But when the non-Muslim world shows itself weak, then they say, hey, this is Allah indicating to us that we're supposed to get aggressive. So weakness invites aggression. We think if we're really, really nice, they'll get nice. They see our niceness as weakness and an invitation to attack. So in the law of nature, you have a lion chasing zebras, and there's a weak zebra that's slow. Which ones are the lions going to pounce on? The weak
FBI
one, the slow
director,
one. Weakness invites aggression. And when they see the non-Muslim, and so you had, Ronald Reagan, I loved him, but when the Muslims blew up the Marine barracks in Lebanon, his response was to tuck tail and leave.
Exactly.
They're like, wow, America is pretty, skittish. And then you have to add in the communists. So during the Soviet-Afghan War in the late 1970s, early 1980s, the U.S. CIA armed and trained the Taliban covertly. It was the largest covert CIA operation. And so here we were, America arming and training the Taliban. And you had Sylvester Stallone did a movie called Rambo 3 on it.
Right. All right.
Tom Hanks did a movie called Charlie Wilson's War on it.
Wilson's War. I saw it just the other day.
It's called Operation Cyclone. And then you had Jimmy Carter abandons our pro-American ally, the Shah, and lets the Ayatollah take over Iran.
Islamic Revolution.
Whenever you see Iran's nuclear weapons, Iran's attacking here, think Jimmy Carter.
Jimmy Carter.
Thank you, Jimmy Carter, because he did that. Iran was so pro-American in the 1970s up until Jimmy Carter. And since now the Ayatollah has Iran, and Iran-Iraq war starts, well, Ronald Reagan and Rumsfeld are arming and training Saddam Hussein and the Iraqis to fight the Ayatollah's Iran. And then George W. Bush switches from Saddam being our friend to our enemy.
Right.
And then you have the Bosnian War, Bill Clinton, Monica Lewinsky, and then Clinton is funneling guns through Iran to the Bosnian Muslims to fight the Serbian Christians. And so when the Muslims finally win and take over Kosovo, they put up a statue of Bill Clinton in downtown Kosovo. And then you have George W. Bush, and then the other Iraq war. And just about every military strategist says, when you conquer an authoritarian country, you just replace the leader with somebody that's on your side. You don't dismantle the entire structure of
Great
the
point.
country.
That's a great point.
Even the Bible, Josiah, he dies and Egypt conquers Jerusalem. What do? They take the one son, Jehoiash, captive, and they take the other son, Jehoiakim, and make him king. And they say, you just have to pay us tribute. They didn't dismantle the whole country. And so what you would normally have expected is, okay, we took over Iraq. Let's replace Saddam with somebody else that we want and have him be a puppet person. But because we dismantled their entire military, their entire government, their entire everything, out of it came ISIS. And so then ISIS, then we find out that Biden left all of our arms
In Afghanistan.
for the Taliban, $85 billion worth. And then I talked to soldiers that said that Chinese planes were flying in while American planes were evacuating out. That Biden gave Afghanistan to the Taliban to give to China so they could have rare earth metals for batteries. And so when you look at it, during the October 7th under Biden, part of all the deals were us continuing to supply stuff to the Hamas.
That's right.
We're supporting Israel, but we have to keep supporting Hamas. It's like craziness. So Trump is reshuffling things. He's appealing to the secular Muslim, and he's showing strength. And this is a strategy that Trump is showing strength, and he's working together with the secular Muslims, which is emboldening them to be more secular, which they sort of want to be more secular. And it's causing the fundamental ones to go into remission.
Gotcha.
Now they still have a goal, and they're working it slowly. I just got news that in Virginia, the government just approved a big Islamic center being built in Haymarket, Virginia. I just read where the governor of Philadelphia, Shapiro, just approved $6 million to expand an Islamic charter school so they could go from 300 students to 3,000 students. I was just in Sugar Land, Texas, where they have a big Muslim community that's infiltrating the Republican Party. In Plano, Texas, they want to build a mega Muslim community called EPIC, East Plano Islamic Community. And so they're infiltrating and they're doing the long game, which is what they did in Europe. Right, they keep coming in, and they have lots of children, and the Westerners are having fewer children, and so we can see a big picture. But Trump is definitely trying to reshuffle the deck, and I do think that it's buying us time, and hopefully good things will come out of it. But I think that the previous way, where under Biden and Obama, they were just abandoning all these Christian minorities to bloodshed, was terrible. So anyway,
yeah, that's great. Oh, it did. It's perfect. It was perfect for what we're going to do tonight. I'll let you go. I mean, one 30-second quick question. In all of this, and I'm with you on Trump, I think it wasn't a criticism. I just pray that I think he recognizes, and I just pray the people around him recognize these fundamentalist Muslims are not going nowhere. They're still wanting the destruction of the United States of America and Israel. And you get into the core of Islam, Bill, that's never going to change. That is not going to change. And no matter how many carrot and sticks, and we got to remember, we got 4 years. We don't know what the next president is going to do. And all that's being done right now can only be continued if you have a president with strength. If you get another weak president, then this is going to blow up in the Middle East like we've never seen it blow up. That's just my take on it. Real quick, 30-second answer on that.
Yeah, well, I do want to mention that I have a book. It's called What Every American Needs to Know About the Quran, A History of Islam in the United States.
Okay.
And then I have a flash drive with 20 different PowerPoint presentations that I've given on the history of Islam, the Ottoman Empire, Lawrence of Arabia, Chaim Weizmann, I mean, all that.
Okay.
And so my website is AmericanMinute.com. AmericanMinute.com.
Best website in America, and I spend way too much money there, but I always get something for it. And speaking of that, I got one of Bill's flash drives right now that I was getting ready to view, and I encourage you to do that. Bill, I know you got to run. Listen, I love you, buddy. I appreciate you, and I will get you back on soon. This has been very good for today, and we'll get you back on next month. It's so good to have you tonight on the McFiles. Be blessed, buddy.
Thank you, Chris.
God bless. Bill Federer, everybody. And what a good guy. Is that not good stuff right there? I hope you learned something tonight. I sit here and soak it in. When I'm interviewing, it's so deep when he goes in these historical journeys, and I'm trying to look at the camera, and I'm trying to remember this stuff. I don't want to be rude and sitting there like I'm had my head down, writing a bunch of stuff, and I listened to this with you all, and I learned a lot just listening to it tonight. There were some things I did not realize how Churchill was actually involved in some of the efforts to derail a Jewish state. And folks, the British Empire was never the same after this day in history of May the 15th of 1948 and May 14th, when they, Bill mentioned the British White Paper of 1939. It condemned 6 million Jews to their death. They could have opened immigration up to what was then known as Transjordan, Palestine, whatever you want to call it. It was the region that we know as Israel tonight and Jordan combined. And Jordan was originally the original Palestinian state. That's where the British envisioned the Palestinians residing and the Jews having their own land, and there not being any fighting, and that just didn't work out. The Arabs weren't going to dare let Israel have their land, and because of the hatred of the devil and the hatred of Satan, and just because the devil wants to see the Jews destroyed. And all those that are anti-Semitic want to see Israel destroyed too, because they got the same father. They got the same father. And but it's a very interesting scenario, and I'll just sort of piggyback on something he said, and I'll let you go, because we got to get back here tonight. We got a great late night show coming to you. The fireworks ain't even started yet. This is good stuff. But the British Empire, basically, the sun set on the British influence over the world after this event. The British were actually in control of a great deal of the Middle East, South America, I'd say Europe in many ways. The influence was heavy. And as Bill sort of confirmed some things I've been telling you in the Bible study, the Second Awakening had a lot to do with this. This was at the time of great revival in our country. In 1891, Theodore Herzl had basically started the first Zionist Congress to push for a Israeli state. They saw the warning signs that anti-Semitism was rising and getting hotter, and they needed a place they knew to be in safety. And it was not but 12 years later that we had the great Azusa Street outpouring in America. The Holy Spirit fell, and then it would take them about 40 years later, but finally Israel had their homeland, and they've had their home state ever since. Couple of quick things. Israel was not formed for the first time in 1948, as some anti-Semitic spiritual voices claim. No, and they were not founded by the Rothschilds, folks. They're not founded by the Kazakian Mafia. They were not founded by the Deep State. They were not founded by the Mossad. They were not established by any of those things. That's just cute conspiracy nonsense. And if you want to believe that, you believe it. Suck it up, smoke a pipe, have a Coke, drive your train right into hell. Drive your anti-Semitic train right into the flames, because that's where you're headed. Me and Jason Miller have been having a lot of conversations this week, and I will tell you, folks, this spirit of anti-Semitism that rests on so-called Christians, it's an oxymoron for you to be anti-Semitic and call yourself a follower of Christ. You can't say you're a follower of Jesus who's Jewish and then turn around and hate his people. And then you have this nonsense that this is not the same Israel as the Israel of the Bible, to the Israel that exists today. Well, explain to me which Israel it is. You got another group that uses this. There's two kinds of Jews. There's all these different sets of Jews. Well, the Bible don't talk about but one set of Jews. That's the descendants of Abraham. And when Christ is talking about they that say they're Jews and are not, it's basically referring to the believers in Jesus at that time, because when Jesus wrote that letter, the church had been established for about 100 years. And what he was referring to was those that knew Christ and those that did not. And folks, let me remind you tonight that, I hear this too, these were the Christ killers and these were the people that rejected Christ. Can you look me in the face tonight and tell me that this nation of America tonight and the spiritual condition that it's in has not rejected Christ? And we've got this idea that the only bad people on the earth, this is what this anti-Semitic spirit has produced, that the Jews are the only bad people on the earth. The Gentiles have nothing to do with the conditions of the earth, like the pedophilia and the trafficking and the vulgarity and the transgenderism and the homosexuality and all the vulgarity and all the perverseness and all the corruption and all the lawlessness and all that. That's all the Jews' fault. We never hold in account any of the other nations of the world for that. We blame Israel for everything. You've got people out there tonight blaming Israel for the Middle East situation in Gaza, that they're the ones killing Gazans. It was a pregnant lady today, folks. Do you realize this? She was on her way to have her baby. Hamas terrorists killed her in cold blood. Thank God the baby survived. But she was killed, a pregnant woman. What was her threat to Hamas? What was her threat militarily to this terrorist group? You know who'll get blamed for that? These anti-Semites out there. These anti-Semites that need to find Jesus real quick. Because they're going to meet him one day. They're going to meet him. They're going to meet him. And I want them. I don't hope for this. I want them to find the Lord. I do, before it's too late. But I will tell you this, if they don't, they're going to stand in front of a Jewish Messiah. And they're going to have to explain to him all of this anti-Semitic talk and explain to a Jewish Christ how Israel, his brethren, have been the bad people on the earth. Rejecting God's word and rejecting everything in the Bible that disputes and totally repudiates every theory, every anti-Semitic theory out there. But I say this with all due respect and love. If you want to get on that train and ride that train and share this stuff out, you are a partaker of the evil deeds of these people that are doing it, and you're going to be held to the same account. We don't traffic in that here. I saw the comment tonight, I guess we globalist, Marxist, because we support Israel. I guess that's what our new name is. Let me tell you something, neighbor. Call us what you will. We're not celebrating a state. We're not worshiping a political system. The nation of Israel itself is away from God tonight, but I will tell you the nation of America is away from God tonight. Every single nation on this earth is away from God tonight. And if the nations don't repent, the nations that forget God are going to be turned into hell. Righteousness exalts a nation, but sin is a reproach to many people. Do you realize that Planned Parenthood, we're going to be talking with Carl and Nicole about this, do you realize that they had more abortions last year and in 2023 than they've had in all the years in the past? And people were screaming up and down, oh, we've got Roe v. Wade down. That's going to stop abortion. No, you see, Roe v. Wade was a law to stop abortion. You've got to get to the heart of the ones killing the babies. And if the heart is evil, they're going to still find a way to kill the baby, whether it's legal or not. And people are going to hate Israel. And you can't change that because that's a heart matter. And that's a demonic matter. And that's being controlled by the devil himself to cause you to do that. Satan hates Christ. The world hates Israel because the world hates Christ. Israel sadly hates Christ too, and they don't realize that the hatred of them comes from the fact that Christ came from them. But those that know the Lord, truly, those that are of the truth, truly, those that know the Word of God, truly, that's why we Bible students in the morning, that's why I love my Bible students, and they'll tell you we hammer this every day. We invite you to come study it with us. We're not going to stop. And I want to remind you again tonight, I've reminded a lot of people, and people call me doubling down. I saw something out there about a year ago that don't double down like McDonald. I'm going to double, I'm going to triple, quadruple down tonight. This nation right here is not mentioned in the Bible. This one right here is mentioned 767 times just in the Old Covenant alone. Zion is mentioned 500 times. Jerusalem's mentioned over 500 to 600 times. If you take Jacob and his surname, he's mentioned another 200 times in the Bible, roughly. Folks, when you start adding that up, you're talking about over 2,000 to 3,000 mentions of some kind of variation of Zion, Israel, Jerusalem, Jacob, Mount Zion. You look at the phrases. We talked about it this morning in Joel. God called them my people, my heritage, who possess my land. God gave his people and his heritage, that land that's being carved up. And I'll say this as I close tonight on this early bird special. I love President Trump. I respect him. I'm so proud that we've got a president that's trying to do the right thing by our country. I really do. I really am. But I pray that if this Abrahamic Accord is what he's going to push on the Arab and the Israeli world, that it does not call for a Palestinian state. Because I will tell you this, if it does, it will fail. It will fail, and it will be a linchpin in his presidency. Because you cannot codify terrorism into a state. And I can tell you this much right now, Christ ain't coming back to a Palestinian capital. He's not coming back to the capital of Palestine. He's coming back to Jerusalem, the capital of Israel, when he comes back. And all Israel shall be saved. All righty. Listen, we're grateful for you being with us tonight. Hope you enjoyed. Did you get something out of this? Did you learn something? Put some fire in that house. Did you learn something? Put some fire in that house. And we're grateful for you tonight. Oh. Oh, I enjoyed that. I enjoyed that tonight. Cedric, I'm in awe of his command of history too, but he loves the Lord. That's what makes him so special. He loves the Lord, and he's a born-again believer, and there ain't no better person than Bill Federer. I've tried my best in the mornings to give you a little history, but he puts me to shame. I figured he'd fill in the blanks for us tonight, and he did. And that's why we had him on tonight. Listen, we ain't done. We got a lot to talk about here. I've got video coming. James Comey's in some trouble tonight, folks. Good Lord. 8647, that's what he put out. And you got to figure, to do that in shells like that, that was not some accident. He's claiming tonight that, I didn't know that 86 meant to kill somebody, so I was just walking along the beach and I saw this shell thing and I thought it was a cute picture. Yeah, right. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the Clintons tonight. We're going to talk about South Africans killing white folks. And, it's amazing the hypocrisy. It's amazing the Dems were telling us that we needed to let all these illegals in, and now they don't want the persecuted farmers down in South Africa coming in. It's just a bunch of hypocrites. The Episcopal Church is a bunch of hypocrites. That woman that called Trump out of the prayer thing, or the inauguration prayer, whenever she was doing what she was doing, I can't remember what event it was, but now she has said she is no longer going to be part of the Episcopal Church because they are endorsing the white folks coming over. It's a bunch of hypocrites, a bunch of spiritual hypocrites. Basically the same argument that people make about the Jews. It's just unreal. But let me remind you again tonight, as I leave you this evening, anti-Semitism is not just an attitude, folks. It's a spirit. It's a sin. It's a sin. And if you want to ride that train into the flames, you ride it. Ride it hard. Ride it hard. I can't change the people out here that are saying this stuff. There's no sense in me arguing with them. There's no sense in me even calling their names to you. It's out there. You ain't got to look hard to find it. It's out there. I'm more concerned about the people that are listening to it and believing it and sharing it. Your sin is just as great as theirs, if not worse. If you listen to this program, you've been given light about it. And to reject light is far worse than never have heard this before. You've heard it from us of how the Bible says about God's plan for Israel, America, and the church. So there's no excuse. And we're not going to change our view on this. We're not worshiping the state. We're not worshiping the nation. Israel has got just as many problems as any other nation does. But I'm going to tell you something. There ain't no other nation that has the promises basically promised to it as Israel has been promised. And those promises will be fulfilled by God. It's lightning. That's the Lord's signal to me. It's time to shut this one down and get ready for the next one. It just thundered. So I'm going to let you go tonight. Listen, God bless you. God bless your families. God bless this great nation of America. Thank you for being with us tonight. Share Bill's video out. AmericanMinute.com. He's got a book and a little CD drive just like this. It's good stuff. These, if you don't want to get a hard book, get these. These are very affordable, and it'll have his books on it. We actually uploaded just now the PDF file to this, what he talked about tonight. If we go to the Telegram room, there's a PDF file. You can download it to your computer, and you can read pretty much everything Bill shared with us tonight. And we hope you enjoyed him. We hate Carl and Nicole couldn't be with us, but in a way, I am glad it was Bill Federer tonight. She'll be back with us next week because we got something to talk about her. But this is what the Lord wanted for tonight. And it's been a good Thursday night. God bless you out there. I'll see you back here in now 45 minutes because Chris keeps running his mouth. We'll be back in about 45 minutes to an hour. Got a lot to talk about tonight on the Late Show. If you can stay up with us, stay up. If you can't, look for the replay tomorrow. We love you all. Subscribe to our channel. Like the video. God bless you out there, folks. Stay safe and stay true. Stay true to the God of heaven, please, tonight, folks. It's late. It's getting late. Jesus is coming. Be blessed.